It is a journey through the Bible with Mukhwana Isaac. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Yesterday we had a brief look into the introduction. We introduced actually Prophet Isaiah, the prophet who talked about God of holiness. When you talk about Isaiah, just know there is something to do with holiness. Today we look at the call of this man Isaiah. Now, from the beginning of his vocation, actually, Isaiah was filled with the thought of the divine majesty and the glory of God's holiness. The day he was called by God to be a prophet, he had a vision of the glory and holiness of God. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up, and his train filled the temple. Above him stood the seraphim. Each had 6 wings. With the 2 he covered his face, and with the 2 he covered his feet, and with the 2 he flew. And one called to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. And the foundations of the thresholds shook at the voice of him who called, and the house was filled with smoke. Isaiah chapter 6, verse 1 to 4. At the sight of the holiness of God, Isaiah was afraid and cried out. And I said, Woe to me, for I am lost, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. The lips of the book of the lips shown in the book of Isaiah mean the words that a person says, but words themselves come from the thought, from our thoughts. And so in saying that his lips were unclean, Isaiah meant that his daily thoughts and actions which follow from thoughts were unclean. In other words, they were far from the pure, holy thoughts of God. This gives an idea of Isaiah's deep understanding of God's holiness. Yes, and so from this is far from the pure, holy thoughts of God. This gives us an idea of his deep understanding. But of course, we can go further from these words of Isaiah, that his lips, his thoughts were far from God's holiness. We can understand that holiness in God means moral purity. That is, that holiness in God means thinking rightly, purity, goodness of thought, and acting rightly. You see, Amos showed us God's justice. Isaiah shows us God's holiness. But really, holiness and justice in God are one thing. The real meaning of justice has changed somewhat. We usually take it as something paying to others what we owe. But justice is more than that. To the Jews, justice meant a moral purity, and by purity, we are not thinking of the 6th commandment, no, but of the real goodness in justice, and of course what justice means. Thinking and doing everything the right, the good way. To think and to act well is holiness, And so justice and holiness are really one and the same thing. You see, in God, it is his justice which makes him holy. We call God holy because he is just. That is, he acts rightly because justice makes God's holiness. Justice is something sacred, and that is why Isaiah preached justice. Yes, for he saw that justice made the people holy, morally clean, and pure before God. This justice, or we can call it holiness, is more important to God than the celebrations of feasts and the offerings of sacrifices which the Jews used to make, but without putting any sincere meaning into their worship. And at the same time, as they pretended to worship God, they practiced all kinds of injustice, things that are not right, not good, and holy. Bring no more vain offerings. Incense is an abomination to me. New moon and Sabbath and the calling of assemblies. I cannot endure iniquity and solemn assemblies. When you spread forth your hands, I will hide my eyes from you. And even though you make many prayers, I will not listen. Your hands are full of blood. Wash yourselves, make yourselves clean, remove the evil of your doings from before my eyes. Cease to do evil, learn to do good, seek justice, correct oppression, defend the fatherless, plead for the widow. We read this in Isaiah chapter 1 verse 13 and 15 to about 17. You see, the true worship that Amos and Hosea worked for by attacking the worship of idols is seen by Isaiah to the contemplation and the adoration of a fully living and personal God. The vision which Isaiah had at the beginning of his ministry of the seraphim worshipping and adoring God made him understand what worship really is. It is not a question of offering sacrifices without thinking what the sacrifice means. Worship remains and means to think of the greatness and holiness of God and to adore him, acknowledging his great holiness, that is his moral purity, righteousness, goodness. Isaiah actually had seen the splendor and magnificence of God in his vision. He understood then that besides meaning justice in the sense of moral righteousness, holiness in God also means his glory, grandeur, and unreachable height of his magnificence. And it is this aspect in God's holiness that is if if remembered, will prevent any familiarity with God breeding into contempt. Something I addressed yesterday. Familiarity breeds contempt. That for me, with God, yeah, we play, we do a high five. No, familiarity breeds contempt. Let us approach God with the sincere hearts, telling him that forgive us, Father, for we have sinned, and that by so doing we shall really approach God and he will listen to our prayers. That brings us to the end of today's episode. Tomorrow we shall continue. We shall have a number of episodes, about 3 to 4, when handling prophet Isaiah. It's not something we are going to handle in one day or in 2 days, because there are a number of lessons we need to draw from Isaiah, why we adore the Lord in the blessed sacrament adoration, which happens every Thursday in the Catholic Church. Something very, very significant. I have been Mukhwana Isaac with the journey through the Bible. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Be blessed.